Some people don't struggle because they see too little. They suffer because they notice far too much, and no one else understands what they're seeing. What if your greatest strength was the exact reason you feel disconnected? There's a hidden pattern psychologists have quietly observed for over a century. It doesn't show up in diagnostic manuals. It doesn't look like illness, but it changes lives. It's the ability to perceive what others overlook. Not just obvious behavior, but subtle emotional shifts, hidden tensions, unspoken motives. And here's the part that unsettles most people. This ability doesn't make life easier. It often makes it harder. Why would clarity create suffering instead of power? Carl Jung encountered this paradox early in his clinical work. He studied individuals who could read people with uncanny precision, detecting emotional undercurrents, silent conflicts, and psychological contradictions almost instantly. They weren't guessing, they were accurate, but instead of thriving, many of them felt isolated, overwhelmed, and misunderstood. Not because something was wrong with them, but because they were perceiving something others couldn't tolerate. And that changes everything. Jung realized he wasn't observing dysfunction. He was witnessing what happens when awareness exceeds social comfort. One particular case stood out. A deeply introspective individual arrived during one of Jung's most turbulent periods. She had an unusual ability, walking into a room and instantly sensing emotional dynamics. Who was hiding pain? Who was pretending? Who carried resentment beneath politeness? And the disturbing part, she was usually right. But her life was falling apart. She struggled to maintain friendships. Conversations felt artificial. People reacted defensively around her. Even workplaces became unstable environments. Why would truth push people away instead of bringing them closer? Because most social systems depend on invisible agreements, unspoken decisions about what will not be acknowledged. When someone breaks those agreements, even unintentionally, they become a problem. Jung noticed something profound. The issue wasn't her perception. It was how that perception disrupted the psychological balance of others. Seeing clearly often means standing alone. He began exploring a deeper phenomenon. Some individuals don't just observe emotions. They absorb them. They pick up the entire psychological atmosphere of a space, not consciously, automatically. Modern research later supported this idea, suggesting a portion of people are naturally more sensitive to emotional and sensory input. But Jung identified something even rarer, a type of mind that doesn't just feel deeply, but interprets hidden psychological patterns with striking clarity. And that's where the real danger begins, because when you see what others ignore, you become a mirror, and most people don't want to see what's reflected. This leads to something Jung described repeatedly. People don't attack the truth, they attack the person revealing it. It's called projection. When individuals are confronted with aspects of themselves they haven't accepted, they push that discomfort outward, often onto the one who noticed it first. And suddenly, the observer becomes the problem. You point out tension, you're negative. You sense dishonesty, you're judgmental. You notice deeper issues, you're overthinking, not because you're wrong, but because you're right too early. People reject mirrors that reflect what they avoid. This creates a pattern. Highly perceptive individuals often become the ones blamed in groups, not for causing issues, but for exposing them. And over time, something dangerous begins to happen. Not externally, internally. You start questioning your own perception. Jung discovered this ability doesn't show up the same way in everyone. It follows different patterns. Some individuals feel everything intensely, absorbing emotions like a sponge. Others recognize patterns, predicting outcomes long before they happen. Some detect physical signals tied to emotional states. And a rare few see everything, but struggle to organize it. Each version carries the same challenge. How do you handle information others don't even register? Because without structure, this ability becomes overwhelming. And that's where the real risk appears. Jung identified 3 major dangers. First, disruption. Groups rely on shared illusions. When those illusions are broken, the group resists. Second, isolation. When your awareness differs too much, connection becomes difficult. Not because you're unwilling, but because your reality feels different. Third, and most dangerous, identity confusion. When you absorb too much from others, you begin losing track of what's actually yours. Your emotions blur. Your thoughts mix with external input, and slowly, you disappear into the noise. That's not sensitivity. That's psychological overload. Jung understood this wasn't something to suppress. It needed to be developed. so he created a process, not to remove the ability, but to integrate it. Step 1. Recognition. Learning to distinguish between your own inner state and what you're picking up from others. Without this boundary, there is no stability. Step 2. Self-confrontation. Acknowledging that what you see in others exists in some form within you, not as judgment, but as understanding. This reduces emotional reactivity and increases clarity, because what you accept in yourself stops overwhelming you in others. Step 3. Controlled engagement. Choosing when and how to use your perception, not reacting automatically, but responding intentionally. This creates strength instead of chaos. Jung observed that people who successfully integrate this ability don't withdraw from the world. They engage more consciously. But there's a critical difference. They don't try to fix everything they see. They don't force awareness onto others. They understand timing and capacity. Some historical figures illustrate this contrast. One type used their perception to challenge everything, becoming isolated and overwhelmed. Another used it carefully, turning insight into guidance others could accept. The difference wasn't intelligence, it was integration. Jung himself experienced this tension. At one point, his own perception nearly destabilized him. He described it as confronting forces within the psyche that felt uncontrollable. But instead of collapsing, he studied it. And that changed everything. He realized something critical. This ability isn't a flaw. It's an advanced function of awareness. But without structure, it becomes destructive. With structure, it becomes transformative. This leads to a crucial question. Who can you share this with? Because not everyone can handle it. Jung identified 3 types of people who can: those who've done their own inner work, those actively growing, and those naturally stable enough to hold complexity. Everyone else will likely resist. That's not personal, it's psychological. So he developed a simple approach. Start small, observe reactions, adjust depth accordingly, and always present insight as possibility, not certainty, because people don't reject truth. They reject how it's delivered. That distinction determines everything. Over time, this ability can evolve from burden to contribution. It follows stages. First, recognition, understanding what you are. Second, integration, using it without losing connection. Third, service, applying it constructively. Fourth, detachment, letting go of needing validation. At this stage, you don't force awareness, you embody it, and something shifts. You stop feeling like an outsider and start becoming a guide. But there are traps. One is believing you're superior. Another is withdrawing completely. A third is losing yourself and helping others. And the most subtle, becoming overwhelmed again during stress. Because this process isn't permanent, it requires maintenance, regular solitude, clear boundaries, ongoing self-reflection, and creative expression. These stabilize perception. Without them, it spirals, and the cycle repeats. Jung believed individuals with this ability serve a role, not as victims, but as early observers. They detect patterns before they become obvious. Social shifts, emotional undercurrents, collective tensions. They feel it first, and often, most intensely. Sensitivity is not weakness, it's early awareness. But the goal isn't to suffer for it, it's to translate it, to bridge what is unseen into something useful, without losing yourself. That's the real challenge. Because seeing deeply isn't the problem, not knowing how to handle it is. When integrated properly, this ability becomes clarity. When ignored, it becomes chaos. So if you've ever felt like you noticed too much, like conversations feel shallow, like you sense things others deny, you're not broken. You're ahead of what's comfortable. The question is, will you develop the skill to use it, or let it consume you? Because the difference between isolation and impact is integration. If this resonates with you, like the video and subscribe to Wines of Thought for deeper psychological insights. And tell me in the comments, do you feel like you see more than others? Because that answer might explain more than you think.